Hello, all you wonderful VITA volunteers. My name is Jim Simpson, and on behalf of the Central Arizona VITA Network, the City of Phoenix, and Masters of Coin, we're going to present a series of videos to help all of you volunteers get certified for the 2025 tax filing season. This will be the first of several videos, and with that said, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. And before we get too far along here, I'd like to give a nice shout out to one of our colleagues. Gene Simpson developed most of these materials here. Gene is a site coordinator for City of Phoenix and a trainer for AARP, their tax counseling for the elderly program. And he put together most of these materials. I'm just here presenting them for you. So let's get a good start on here. We'll present this. This is session one. Now, generally, let me give an overview of these sessions. We have 6 of these sessions that we usually present in a live format. And in each one of these sessions is designed to go 3 to 4 hours long. But that includes a lot of hands-on work, which we're not going to be able to do in an online video too much. So instead, what I've done is I've broken these up into probably hour-long sessions. And each one of these sessions will have a table of contents or chapter indexes so that you can skip around and get to it. As I said, there's going to be 6 of these sessions. They'll be split up into probably 12 videos. The first session that we're going to start in today goes over, introductions. The VSOC stands for the Volunteer Standards of Conduct, how to get logged into the various programs and sites you need to get logged into. We're going to start talking about the test that you need to take, and then we're going to look at TaxSlayer, which is the program that we use for preparing tax returns, and actually get started on the first return. Now that's the first session, which I say we'll break up into 2 different videos. The other remaining sessions, as you can see here on the screen, go over such things as the intake and interview quality review test, filing status, dependents, income, deductions, all these things, the Affordable Care Act. So we're going to cover everything that you need to know, soup to nuts, to be able to become certified and to help our clients in a VITA site. So today, we'll probably cover the first 4 of these things in this video. Okay, we'll talk a lot about the volunteer standards of conduct. Now, many of you, I'm assuming you're either returning volunteers or you've already watched the first video about getting started and how to get into that Link and Learn site. And I showed some materials and we talked about the volunteer standards of conduct and also the intake and interview test. You may have already taken those tests, and if you have, wonderful. This session here is going to go into a lot more detail than we went into in that brief introductory. So if you don't need to see this, you can skip ahead to the things that really pertain to you. And as I said, the Link and Learn login we covered in that, excuse me, in that first session. We're going to show you how to go in and we're going to go over that volunteer standards conduct test. In the second video of this session, we'll actually get into TaxSlayer, something called the Practice Lab. That's the real software that we're going to use, but the Practice Lab is kind of like a sandbox. You can go do anything and none of it counts. You're not going to hurt a thing. So we're going to show you how to use that and go through how the TaxSlayer software works and then actually start doing tax returns. So this is what that session 1's going to be. Okay. Let's give kind of an overview of the tests that you have to take to become certified. And really, all we're really focusing on are these ones that are highlighted yellow. Every volunteer, whether you're doing tax returns or just checking people in, if you're working at a VITA site, you've got to take these first 2 tests. They're not very difficult. They're like 10 questions each. And again, if you miss that first video, I'll go ahead and say a lot of students, they freak out when you talk about having to take tests. You know, um, a few things about the tests that you're going to take here. First of all, you only need 80% to pass it. As I said, these first two right here, the volunteer standards of conduct and intake and interview, they're like 10 questions each. All you got to do is get 8 of them right. Okay. Um, if you don't pass it the first time, you get a second shot at it. You can take it a second time. And then here's the real good thing. They give you all the questions beforehand. Okay, so we'll kind of go over that booklet and show you how to get to that. After you take those 2 tests, we want all of our volunteers to certify at the advanced level. Now, some of you may be looking over here and saying, oh, well, this is my first year. I just want to do the basic right here. Well, a couple of things. Let me tell you about that. The advanced is not that much harder. And let me just reassure you right now, I don't think there's any site coordinator who, if you go up and you talk to them and you're looking at a return and you don't feel comfortable doing it, they're not going to want you doing that return. They're either going to put you with a more experienced volunteer or help you with the things that you need help with. So, but we want you to certify at the advanced level, if for no other reason than you're at least aware of all the issues that are there. We will never ask you to do a return you don't think you're comfortable doing. And if you don't already know by now, every return gets a second set of eyes set on it and a quality review done of it. So we all make mistakes, and if you make a couple of mistakes, that's more likely than not to be picked up during the quality review, and then you can learn from it. Now, you see all of these other tests around here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but just a brief overview. This one over here on the left that says Circular 230 professionals, those are only for CPAs, attorneys, and enrolled agents. It's kind of a much harder but very abbreviated test that they can take with the assumption that they've already been practicing for many years. Over here on the right, there's a foreign student exam. This is only for advanced folks that have a couple years under their belt. This is not that easy of an exam, but it's to help foreign students that are over here studying. They may work a little bit. They have to file a tax return. They also have to file a form that talks about their days of presence in the United States. They can only be here for so long, and so this is the way that they document how long that they've been here. So that's a form we can help them with. Some of us work, for instance, I have a site at Scottsdale Community College, and we have several foreign students there. So a couple of us will get certified in that. Again, the site coordinator exam is only if you're going to be a site coordinator. You know, I don't even think they have this qualified, experienced volunteer. They tried it a couple years ago. I never took it. I don't know to it. Then there's a couple more down here. I've never even taken the Puerto Rico ones. I imagine there might be some sites that would have you do it. The military one, there are some sites like over by Luke Air Force Base, and there's a couple of us at Scottsdale Community College. We get certified because we get military folks over there. And then there's an international exam. And again, in the VITA program, we don't see very many of these, but still, I'll get certified in this because I help some folks get ITINs. Those are called individual taxpayer identification numbers. And sometimes if they have to file, if they're, an international taxpayer, there's a few things you've got to learn about those. So that's kind of an overview of the test. Again, we're just focused on these 3 right here. As I said a moment ago, all volunteers must complete every year, not just once, the standards of conduct training and test. Now, there's a publication. I'm going to go over a lot of things, but if you don't feel comfortable yet when you do it, you can go through, you can find this publication online. Just type in Google publication 4961, and that will give you a little booklet about the standards of conduct. Similarly, there's one called the Intake and Interview and Quality Review Training. Again, there's a publication. It's kind of like a slideshow that'll walk you through those. I covered those things in that first video of how to do it. And then the advanced certification test, as I told you a moment ago, they give you all the questions, not the answers, but they give you all the questions. okay? And those are found in publication 6744. So we're going to find those. Now, where do you go actually take the test? Is right down here at this link. It's called linklearncertification.com. And we're going to talk about, just in case you didn't go through that first video, we'll talk about how you get logged on there, okay? Every year, all volunteers, they've got to have passed the appropriate testing before volunteering at any VITA site. In our case, that's those 3 exams that I told you about. Now, I should back off. We do have some volunteers who just do greeting and screening. They don't prepare any tax returns. And of course, they don't have to take the advanced test. They just have to take those first 2 right there to do it. And then all volunteers have to complete this form 13615. Get used. IRS likes their form numbers. They're going to say, we call it the volunteer agreement. And that's an agreement that's got to be signed and dated by both you and the site coordinator or volunteer coordinator at whichever organization you're working through. This next point is really important right here. The name must match your photo ID, because either your volunteer coordinator or site coordinator, they're going to want to see the ID and make sure that matches the volunteer agreement. And the names have to be exact. For instance, I go by Jim Simpson, but my ID says James. So I have to register as James. That volunteer agreement confirms what tests you've passed and what certification level. And as I said, it's got to be signed by either the site coordinator that you're working at, or there sometimes larger organizations have a volunteer coordinator that keeps track of all of these things. Okay. So here's some reference tools and resources we're going to use. One of the biggest ones that you use is an IRS Publication 4012. That's kind of what I call our quick reference guide. And it's kind of a thick book. It's available online, but we will give you a hard copy too. That's one of 2 books that the IRS gives us that we can pass out to volunteers. So you'll get a hard copy. You'll want to keep it with you as you're doing tax returns. Mine gets to be a tattered mess by the end of the year because you're marking it up and making little notes in there and finding things, putting little flags on there of where you go too quick. So that's a really important one. It is available online too, though, okay? There's another thing called the Interactive Tax Assistance, which you get through irs.gov, that can walk you through questions and answers. It's kind of like a, should I call it artificial intelligence? But yes, kind of, but you're asking it questions and then it'll ask you further more questions about what it is. Another resource here is IRS Publication 17. There'll be a copy of this at your site and it's available online. The IRS doesn't print them out for us anymore. That gives you a little bit more detailed explanation of what's in the 4012. Then a real good resource is your site coordinator. You'll be preparing returns there. You can go through all of this training and I promise you're going to still walk away with more questions than you have. The only way you really get kind of good at this is dive in and start doing it and know that you're going to have questions. You're going to have to get help from your other fellow volunteers or site coordinators. I've been a CPA for 35 years, been doing taxes, and nobody knows it all. I still, when I go take these tests, I'll miss 1 or 2 of them. I find myself, I've got to look stuff up all the time. So don't be intimidated by that. Use these resources. Your site coordinator is a good person to go. You can come back and look at these training slides, or I'm going to publish these videos here on our Central Arizona VITA website too, or in YouTube. They'll be on a YouTube site there. There's also a chat function within the return that you can chat with TaxSlayer. And for really the really deep questions where we're having trouble with the software, VITA or TaxSlayer has an 800 number. Usually and by the way, that's not available to the public, right? And usually I say, let the site coordinators go do that because they've got to give them lots of information like the site identification number and stuff like that. Okay, here's some more resources. Now, a minute ago, I told you about that 4012 being the quick reference guide. I like to refer to this, and it's only online. You can only get it online. This is like a real thick book. It's like 400 pages, but this is, I'm an ex-community college instructor, a retired community college instructor. I call this the textbook. This has got all the detail in it. And so if you're finding yourself not sure about what we've talked about in these slides, or you look in the 4012 and want more information, this is a real good resource to go to, and you can download the 4491 from there. Here's what that 4012 looks like. You can, again, download this from irs.gov, or as I said before, we'll start passing these hard copies out when we have our first volunteer meetings. This is one you'll keep with you, okay? Here's our test book, okay, the 6744. This has all the questions of the test. Now, remember I told you, even if you don't pass it the first time, they'll give you a second shot at it. So there's a test and a retest. That's why it says right up in here, volunteer assisters test and retest. So it gives you all the test questions, gives you all the retest questions for every exam that's in there, okay? We will give you a hard copy of this booklet, although you can download it online. My suggestion, and here's what I do, I go through this booklet and I answer all the questions in the booklet. In fact, in a minute, I'm going to show you when we get into Link and Learn, as of today's date, which is about the end of November, November 29th, the Link and Learn, you can't take the test online yet, but you still can go through. The book is out, the questions are there, you can go through and answer all the questions within the book. And then when Link and Learn comes up live, just go in and put your answers into Link and Learn. What else have we got here? Okay, let's talk about an overview of what happens at the VITA site, right? So clients come in and there's a greeter, sometimes a screener. Different sites have different ways of doing things, but we'll have somebody sign in. The very first thing we're going to ask them for is, did you bring your social security card and a photo ID? The sooner we can determine that they've got everything that they need, the better, because the worst thing you want to do is get halfway through the return and find out they don't have certain documents or missing a W-2. Then you got to send them away and come back. And it's just, we try to make sure that they've got everything they need right when they get to that greeting and sign-in. And then we do an intake. We hand them a form 13614-C. That's the intake form, we call it. And it's like, 4 pages, 3 pages of information actually that they fill out. And it asks them lots of questions. What kind of income did you have? Did you have insurance through the Affordable Care Act? Did you sell any digital assets? Did you, everything we need to do it. And then again, at some sites, they'll have kind of an intake coordinator right there before they go to a preparer that goes through all of their documents and their answers on that sheet. Or sometimes, some sites, after they filled out the intake sheet, they just set them down with the preparer, but the preparer has to go through that intake form and make sure they've answered all the questions, make sure their documents match, try to make sure they've got everything that they've done to prepare a return before they even start the return. Okay. Then they get in through tax return preparation, they go through and prepare it, and then they'll go through quality review. That can differ at different sites. Some sites, the one rule is that whoever reviews the return has to be certified at the same level as the preparer or above. Many of us that run sites, we've got designated quality reviewers that have more experience and can do that. Or sometimes they've got expertise in certain areas like education credits or the Affordable Care Act or things like that. So we may designate certain quality reviewers for that. But every return must go through quality review. And then we have the taxpayer sign up, we give them a copy of them, and then the site coordinator will usually be the one that transmits the electronic return. Okay, so let's talk about the volunteer standards of conduct. As I said, I kind of briefly talked about this in that getting started video. So if you've already taken this test, you can skip this part of it, but I'm going to go through a little bit more detail than I did in that earlier video, right? Um, as I said, all volunteers have to take this volunteer standard of conduct. What is the volunteer standard of conduct? It's basically ethics that you're going to do things what are right in a manner of integrity, and you, you're going to make your best efforts to do everything correct. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. Is our whole goal is to prepare an accurate tax return that gets the taxpayer the most money that they're going to get and keeps them out of trouble with the Internal Revenue Service, right? So when I say that this is kind of an ethics exam, let's talk about what unethical means, right? And the proper definition would be, quote, not conforming to agreed standards of moral conduct, especially within a particular profession. In most cases, unethical behavior is acted upon with the intent to disregard the established laws, procedures, or set policies. That word intent right here is pretty important. It's the difference between did you intend to do something or did you just make a mistake, right? Don't confuse an unethical action with a simple mistake. I've been doing taxes 35 years. We all make mistakes. I remember when my mentor at a large CPA firm, he used to tell me, Jimmy, he said, every return that goes out this door has got a mistake on it. Our job is just to make sure it doesn't matter, right? And so we just get used to mistakes. You'll do a return, the quality reviewer will find a couple things, they'll go over it with you so that you learn, you know, and that way we make sure we're doing an accurate return. So here's an example of that idea of a simple mistake versus unethical conduct. So if volunteer Mary prepares a return which includes a credit the taxpayer does not qualify for because Mary just doesn't understand the law, she did not act unethically. However, if Mary knowingly allowed a credit for which the taxpayer did not qualify, she committed an unethical act and violated the volunteer standards of conduct. Now, let's put this in a real world perspective. We're working with, we deal with low income folks, and we'll start doing a return and we realize, wow, man, if we just didn't put this in, we could get them a bigger refund and they need it, man, Well, that's unethical. You can't do that. On the other hand, sometimes like education credits can get very complex. And you may be doing that things and you may just make a mistake. That's not unethical. We do it. By the way, while we're on this part, you're a volunteer and you might be looking at this stuff and saying, wow, what if I make mistakes and I get sued or something out of this? Well, you as a volunteer, you're protected under the Volunteer Protection Act. As long as you follow these rules and you don't do anything that you're what we call out of scope. We'll go over that in a bit. You are protected under the Volunteer Protection Act. So you don't need to worry about that. Just what we need to do is be sure you're following all the rules. That's what you need to be sure of. So here's another example. If Mary knowingly does not list cash income on a tax return, and Ed, the quality reviewer, just misses the omission, who's acted unethically? Well, Mary's knowingly prepared a false return and she's in violation of the standards. Ed, if he does not notice the admission, did not knowingly prepare a false return and he didn't violate any standard. So what are these standards that we're talking about? And these are called the quality site requirements, okay? And so this first thing under the volunteer standard of conduct, number one, is that you will follow the quality site requirements. We refer to them as QSRs, okay? So let's talk about these QSRs. The first one is certification, that you're going to complete your training courses and testing prior to working at your site. Maybe you've worked at these sites for 10 years and you know how to do this, but you have to be certified every year to do it. And then the site coordinator has to confirm your identity when you report to the site the first time. So don't be, put off if they ask to see your ID and all that. That's what we're required to do. QSR number two is that you use the intake and quality review sheet. You don't bypass that step. I have a site, a senior center site, and some of these volunteers have worked there for 10 years and they've dealt with the same people for 10 years. We still have them fill out the intake and interview sheet and we go through the process. Okay. Every QSR number 3, every return gets a quality review. Okay. It doesn't matter what, even if unless it's your own return, you don't have to have somebody quality review your own return. Any other return has to be quality reviewed, and that intake sheet has to be gone over a second time to make sure we didn't miss anything. QSR number 4 is that there'll be reference materials, that all sites will have publication 4012s and pub 17s on the site on there. QSR number 5 is the volunteer agreement. You've got to complete the volunteer agreement and sign it. QSR number 6, now most of the rest of these things really don't apply too much to you as volunteers. They're more for the site coordinator. For instance, QSR number 6, timely filing. Once the return is prepared and it's marked complete, the site coordinator should transmit that return within 24 hours. So it's done. And then QSR number 7, Title 6, these are posters that talk about the taxpayer's Bill of Rights and what their rights are, and they need to be displayed at the tax site. Again, that's the responsibility of the site coordinator. QSR number 8, there's something called a site ID number. And again, the site coordinator has to just make sure the software is set up with the right site ID number. Same thing with the e-file number, an EFIN we call it. And this is the site coordinator's responsibility to make sure we've got the right e-file number. But now QSR number 10 kind of is for everybody, for all of us. Security, privacy, and confidentiality. This is important. Sometimes we're in kind of close quarters and you need to keep your voice down, make sure your computer screen is kind of turned to where somebody's not over there jotting down their bank account number or social security number. We need to just be aware of our circumstances and try to protect the security, privacy, and confidentiality of these taxpayers. That's something they deserve that we do. So those are the 10 QSRs. So the first volunteer standard conduct is that you will follow these 10 QSRs. The second one says, I will not accept payment or solicit donations for preparing taxes. Period. Okay? And these folks they'll offer you $5 or $10 or some gift. We don't accept any kind of payment in any way, shape, or form. We don't ask for donations. If one of the clients brings in a box of donuts, we'll share them with the clients, everybody who's there at the site. That's okay, but they can't give you any kind of gifts for doing it. Number 3 says you will not solicit any business from the taxpayers. Period. I've run a CPA firm. We'll have taxpayers. We're going to learn a little bit about what I call out of scope returns. They're just some returns we can't do. And they'll say, well, look, can't you do that for me on your own time? No, we cannot do it. Even though we can't do it at the VITA site, we cannot solicit their business. And that extends to other types of business too. If you sell other things or whatever, and you see that this client's in need of this other service that anything that you could profit from, we do not do, period there. The second bullet there, you cannot ask clients out. We need to behave in a professional manner, okay, period. Number 4, say, I will not knowingly prepare false returns. Okay, duh, but as I said earlier, sometimes you're kind of with these people and, here, I'll give you an example. You're going through the interview, there's a part of thing, did you have any other income? Did you do that? And say, well, yeah, I earned $400 mowing lawns, but I don't have to count that because I didn't get a 1099 for that. Wrong. You do have to count it. And once they say it, it's, you can't put it back in the bag. Once they say that, you've got to do it. Otherwise, you're knowingly preparing a false return. You've got to count that income. Or listing false dependents. we're going to learn a lot about dependents and whether which dependent lived with which divorced parent or not, and maybe the taxpayer saying, well, I know he hasn't claimed them, and I always claim them, but hey, if they don't meet the rules, we can't knowingly put them on that way. Okay? So, number 5, I will not, this is an interesting one. I will not engage in criminal, infamous, dishonest, notoriously disgraceful conduct, and this is the important part, or any other conduct deemed to have a negative effect on the VITA programs. Now that's more all-encompassing, right? It's not the standard of a court of law about you're innocent until proven guilty. Have you done anything that looks bad on our program, right? So keep that in mind there. Number 6, I will treat all taxpayers in a professional, courteous, and respectful manner. And, sometimes clients do get upset with you. And, tax laws change from year to year. Their situations change from year to year. They go fill out a different W-4 and lower their withholding, not realizing what they did. And they'll come back, we'll prepare the return, and man, I got $1,000 back last year. You must have done something wrong, blah, 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 and they get mad. You have to just maintain yourself in a professional manner. Now, the first, in that kind of a case I just told you, the very first thing is get the site coordinator involved. You do not have to deal with this. You're not paid enough to deal with this, right? Let the site coordinator handle these things, okay, if they're upset or something like that. Just be polite about it and just say, hey, let's talk with the site coordinator. They can probably explain things better. Usually, in like the situation that I've explained, and especially if they brought their last year's tax return, I'll just sit down and go over with them line by line what the difference is. And they usually understand. And then you can maybe help them to fix it for next year. That's what we want to try to do. What are the consequences of not adhering to this? Okay. You can be barred from volunteering with VITA. Yes, there is a blacklist. Okay. There's a registry of barred volunteers. If if you're knowingly doing something wrong, you're not protected by the Volunteer Protection Act. And if the taxpayer is liable for any tax deficiency, they could seek money from the preparer or what we call the spec partner. The spec partner is the sponsoring organization, like City of Phoenix or Masters of Coin as a nonprofit, or United Way. They're the sponsoring thing. They could become liable too. Also, we could lose funding. We get grants from IRS for that. And so if we have too many of these kinds of errors, which usually we don't, okay, most people get this, but there are consequences to this too. What if the taxpayer is not telling the truth? Now, this is a good one. And I tell my volunteers all the time, we are not auditing them. We rely on them to tell us the truth. We rely on what they fill out on that intake and interview form. We'll ask them questions. We dive deeper into this, and if they come up and say something, so first of all, if they come up and say something that's really outlandish and you just know that they're not telling the truth, you do not have to do the return. You should get the site coordinator involved right away. Okay, there's the first thing. On the other hand, maybe it's just, don't. Here's what I do with them, okay, and this is a phrase that we use at the end of the return when we have them sign. We say, look, you're responsible for everything that's on the return. Here, I'll give you a more concrete example. Well, did you make any charitable contributions? Well, yeah, I made some. What's the maximum I can do? Well, if they ask me that kind of a question, I'm not going to let them do that. On the other hand, they say, well, yeah, I was giving money to the church every week. Most weeks it was $20. That might have been 15 or something. And I go to church every thing. So you count them up and they give you a number. So, and it may not be perfectly accurate. I tell them, look, you're responsible for what's on the return. And at the end of this, you're going to sign a statement to that effect. So if I were you, I would go home, go through your calendar, document what you have, because if you get audited, an auditor is going to ask you for proof of this contribution. But I'm going to put in what you told me because you're responsible. I'm just putting in what you tell me to put in. Okay, so that's kind of how I handle that. But you have to do this. You have to conduct thorough review interviews and get as much information as you can. And if you say you're not comfortable with it, get the site coordinator involved because you do not have to prepare the return. Taxpayers ultimately responsible. We're just putting in what they tell us. On the other hand, if they tell us that we know something's wrong, we should not be doing the return. Okay. That sentence I was just telling you about, that what they sign, and I don't tell them this, but what it says, if they read it, it says that they're signing it under penalty of perjury, that they've examined the return and its company forms for accuracy. I don't use the phrase penalty of perjury, but I do. Usually in this process, I've told them this 3 times. They're responsible for everything on the return. We're just putting in what they gave us. Okay. As I said, we're going to try to treat all taxpayers professionally with courtesy and respect. We're going to guard the confidentiality of their information. We're going to apply the tax laws equitably and honestly. And we're only going to prepare returns within the scope of your training and this program. I've said this now like 3 times about scope of service. This means there are certain returns we're allowed to do. There are certain returns that under your certification that you're allowed to do. As I went over those certifications, we saw like a military one and a foreign student one, and we'll show you in this training how you can determine which certification you need to be able to do the return. Don't do something that you're not certified for. You only prepare returns that are within the scope of your training and this program. We exercise reasonable care in the use and protection of equipment and supplies. Okay. We don't accept payment from any taxpayer for any services. We don't download any programs onto the computers. Many of these sites, they provide us with computers, and you may think, well, yeah, I got this little tool I can do. Don't download stuff onto their computers. I mean, there's a security risk in that, and we need to respect what they've done for us. Okay, so now let's take a look at what some of these test questions are in publication 6744. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to open up a browser. So give me just a minute here. So here's the browser. So if I was just to go out here to Google, right, and put in pub 6744, you can say publication 6744, or you could go on to irs.gov, the website. But this is pretty common. This comes up, irs.gov, VITA TC, or Volunteer Assisters Test and Retest. So I can go there and then I can download this publication. Now, I have it downloaded, so I'm going to stop sharing this browser and open up the actual PDF that I've got here. So give me one more second here. Okay, and then we'll share this test booklet, and we'll kind of go over the things in this test booklet that you've got. Okay, you should all be able to see this now, and I'll make it kind of bigger. So this is the one for 2025 returns right here, and I'm going to just scroll down because there's a couple of things I kind of want to show you in here. First of all, here's the table of contents, right? It gives you some things. It gives you a test answer sheet. My recommendation is that you take the test in this booklet. You can record your answers in the test answer sheet or just write them in the booklet, right? But I would do it in here first. Here's another thing I would tell you. I would take both the test and the retest. The reason is because all the questions, they kind of model each other exactly in the test and the retest. They just ask it in a different format. One might be multiple choice, one might be true, false, or, and sometimes the question in the retest kind of gives you a clue about what answer you provided in the first one. You realize, oh boy, that was wrong. So it helps you go back and do it. It just kind of reinforces it. But here we're going to go look at this one, volunteer standards of, whoops, see, that's the retest question. I want to go up here to this one, the volunteer standards of conduct test. Before I go there, I'm just going to basically scroll down through here. So here you have the basic scenarios, right? And they call these scenarios because, and actually I'm going to skip ahead to the advanced. We don't really want you taking the basic. You don't have to take the basic before you take the advanced. It's not a prerequisite. The advanced is not that much harder, and as I've said, we really want you to certify to the advanced, even if you just do simple basic returns, right? So, but what does it mean by advanced scenarios? The scenario, the first, I think 6 of them they just give you a fact pattern of this, and then they ask you a few questions about the fact pattern. The last 3, though, you have to prepare a return to be able to answer the questions. And so that's kind of how this test booklet's laid out. So I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to that. Let's now go look at some of these questions in the volunteer standards of conduct. So that starts on page 14, right? So I'm going to scroll on down here to page 14. Okay, here's the volunteer standards of conduct, right? And so it tells you that you have to annually pass this, and you have to sign that volunteer standards of conduct. It's an annual requirement. Okay, and as I've repeated it, so I won't repeat it. But let's look at some of these questions, right? And it says, using your resource materials, answer the following questions. So you may say, well, what resource materials do I have? In the earlier presentation where I went, there's a publication for it. And actually, in fact, let me stop right now and show you where you could get those resource materials in case you don't feel comfortable yet taking this test. Let me stop sharing this. And let me open up a browser. And I'll share the browser. And if we were to go into Link and Learn, which you can get there by, it's linklearncertification.com. All of this I went over in the previous video, but if you didn't watch that, you can go here, linklearncertification.com. And down here, there's resources, right? There's that. And see down here, we've got the VSOC training. There's also training for, right here, intake interview and quality review training. So if I was to click on this link that says VSOC training, volunteer standards conduct training, it takes me to this publication. And this publication, you can go through and read it. It's not that long, 20 some pages, but it talks about all of those things that we just talked about briefly in the slides. So you could always go here to find the resources. So let me stop sharing that. And I'm going to start sharing, go back here to our test booklet. And let's look at some of these questions, right? So using your resource materials, answer the following questions. And of course, I'm not going to answer them for you, but I just want you to think through this. Prior to working at a VITA TCE site, all volunteers, greeters, facilitators, preparers, quality reviewers must, and you answer these things. Now, here's a test taking thing, right? When you see down here where it says all of the above, both A and B, don't just read the first answer and think, oh, that's it, because they kind of trick you maybe down here. It might be more than one. So read all of those, but I think that's a slam dunk. You can do that. Can a volunteer be removed and barred from the VITA TCE program for violating the volunteer standards of conduct? I think we kind of covered that. You should be able to answer that. If a taxpayer offers you a $20 bill because they were so happy about the quality of the service, what should you do? I think you know the answer to that. So I guess what I'm trying to show you here is this is not that complicated of a test, right? It's kind of a lot of common sense. A couple of these get a little bit more, right? Here it says Jake is an IRS tax law certified preparer. When preparing a return for Jill, Jake learns that Jill does not have a bank account to receive a direct deposit of her refund. Jill is distraught when Jake tells her that a paper refund check will take 3 to 4 weeks longer. And by the way, I'm going to give you a little clue later on. It's probably going to take way longer than that now because they don't want to issue paper checks anymore. But back to this question. It says, Jill asks Jake if he can deposit a refund in his bank account and then turn the money over to her when he gets it. What should he do? So read the answers. I think your common sense will take you to the answer of that one. Max prepares a tax return and he finds out during the interview that Ali has no health insurance. After Ali leaves the site, Max writes her name and contact information down to take home to his wife who sells health insurance. Which of the following statements is true? Well, we've covered in our lecture what you should do about that. Okay. Bob, an IRS tax certified preparer, told the taxpayer that cash income does not need to be reported because the IRS does not know about it. Bob indicated no cash income. Bob prepared a tax return excluding the cash income. Jim, as the quality reviewer, was unaware of the conversation and therefore unaware of the cash income, and the return was printed, signed, and e-filed. Who violated the volunteer standards of conduct? Okay, pretty simple. This one maybe gets a little bit more complex. You got to think it through a little bit. Sue is a site coordinator. She's watching the local news when she sees Aaron, a new tax law certified volunteer, in a story about several bank employees being arrested for suspicion of embezzlement. She saw Aaron being led out of the bank in handcuffs. 3 days later, Sue is shocked when she sees Aaron show up at the site ready to volunteer, apparently out on bond. Okay, I think you see where this is going. What's the proper thing? What appropriate actions should Sue take as the coordinator? Okay, a couple more. Sam is assigned to prepare a taxpayer's return. Taxpayer's been waiting a long time due to the volume of taxpayers needing service. That can happen. Taxpayer is agitated when they sit with Sam. How should Sam interact with the taxpayer? Okay. I think you could answer that one without going back through all the materials. Okay. Here's another one about soliciting business. And here's another one. See, Ben is preparing a tax return and the taxpayer has a dependent listed. The dependent is the child of the taxpayer's cousin. The child lived with the taxpayer a few months. Ben prepared the return and indicated on Form 13614C that the child lived with the taxpayer all year. Did Ben violate the volunteer standards of conduct? Okay, so the point I wanted to go through here is not to answer these for you, but that these are basically just testing you on the ethics of this, and a lot of it is just common sense and, answering them. So, but there are materials you can go back. Here are the retest questions. I'm not going to go through them, but just as a general rule, I would go through and answer these. Okay, they might give you a clue to the other ones that you thought you knew and then realized, oh, whoops, maybe I didn't answer that one right. It only takes a few minutes. Okay, so let's see where we are in our presentation here. We're here where we said review material in 6744. Okay, so let's look just as a reminder about this Link and Learn Taxes certification site. Okay, and here's where you go to get to that. It's linklearncertification.com. And just as a, I think that this is the last part that I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give you a refresher of how to get into the Link and Learn certification. And then I think you should go take the test on the volunteer standards of conduct. And I think we'll call this enough for this video. And when we come back we'll call it 1B, we'll start talking about Tax Layer Practice Lab. So let me stop sharing this and see, how do we get to there? So you guys should be seeing my browser. Yeah, you can do this. And as I said, we just go to linklearncertification.com. Before you do anything, right, let me just kind of go over a couple of things that's on this first page before you even sign in or create an account or anything. Because we were here a minute ago, right, where I showed you that there were some links here for training materials for this stuff. This link right here would take you to that form 6744. When we come back for the next video, we're going to talk about the practice lab. And here's a way you could get to the practice lab, right? There's also, if you wanted to self-study instead of going through all of these videos, there's link and learn taxes lessons right here that you can get to for here. So there's a lot of good things on this first site. But if you took the getting started, if you looked at the getting started video, we went through there about how to create an account. So if you haven't created an account and this doesn't make sense to you, go watch that video. But if you have, then you're just going to go sign in right here. I've got a couple of these. Let me sign into this account right now. Okay, and once you sign in, there's a couple of things I want to point out. As I said, this is November, what did I say, 29th, right? And it says here, all tests are currently offline. So you can't get back to take these tests right now. But when they are online, you can just either click right here, take certification to test, or go here to certifications, and you can go in there and you'll have to take the test. If you cannot take the advanced test until you take those first two, the volunteer standards of conduct and the intake and interview. This is, another thing I might tell you is if you have created the account, be sure to update your profile. I went and just clicked on this JS and you could go here in your profile. Now, see, here's a mistake I made, although this was just a practice account. Remember I told you your name must match your driver's license. I should have put James here. In fact, I think I can even edit it here. Put it. If I put here and then profile image, I wouldn't put up a profile image. Make sure your contact information is correct, especially a phone number and that. Group selection, this is not going to apply to anybody unless you're a site coordinator or volunteer instructor. This is only for IRS employees. Oh, Form 13615 details. What is that Form 13615? That's the volunteer agreement, right? So you want to go and update this. And you can say here, link and learn taxes. I would just put in publication 4491, okay? Sponsoring partner. My organization is called Masters of Coin. Okay, so I can put that in here. How many years have you volunteered? Count this year. I think I'm in my 11th or 12th year. Now, when it asks for professional designation, this is only for attorneys, CPAs, or enrolled agents. This is so that they can get continuing education. So you can just leave this blank if you're not one of those, right? Volunteer positions, you should check that you're a VITA volunteer. If you're anything else, like I'm a site coordinator, I could put this in. I'm also an instructor. I could put this in, right? And then if you are doing continuing education, this is only if you're a CPA, enrolled agent, or attorney, you should have a practitioner's taxpayer ID number. You need that, what your professional status is, and what the site identification number is. Your site coordinator will help you fill this out. So you should do these things. I'll click next save, and then I'm back here. I could get back out. Now that doesn't take me out. I have to sign out of here or log out of it to get back to these quick links to if you want. So that's how you get into the Link and Learn site. As we do more videos, these tests should be coming up any day now, and we'll have a chance to get in there and show you how to take a test. So with that, let's sign off for right now, and I'll have 1B done fairly soon. Okay, bye-bye.